Guys, yeah, I know my voice is loud enough that I don't need a microphone. However, I'd like to call the Monday, January 14th, 2019 regular meeting of Committee of the Whole to order. Can we please stand for the National Anthem for those that are able? Thank you. Madam Clerk, introduction of addendum and delegation items, please.
Hi, so there's 3 addendum items tonight. Michael Smith, who is listed as a delegation, will be presenting at the January 28th meeting. Norbert Geiger will be delegating under item 1 this evening. And in the recommendation under item 3, the name Chris Davies should be added to the Main Street BIA Board of Management.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. Confirmation of agenda. Mover and seconder. Councillor Bruno, Councillor Wells. Any questions? All those in favor? That's carried. Any disclosures of interest this evening? Seeing none. I'll do the adoption of minutes in block. We have the special meeting of Committee of the Whole 23-18 held on December 10th, 2018. Regular meeting of Committee of the Whole 24-18 held on December 10th, 2018. Mover and seconder. Councillor Beauregard, Councillor Danch. Any questions? All in favor? That's carried. Items determining separate discussion. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Items 1, 2, and 5, please.
Anyone else? Oh, Councillor Bruno? Yes, just wait a minute. I'll recognize when you want to speak anyway, so yeah, as long as we get it pulled. Okay. Do you want a different item that hasn't been pulled?
Number 4.
Item 4? Okay, anything else? Motion to approve those items that haven't been lifted. Councillor Desmarais, Councillor Bagu, questions? All in favor? That's carried. There's no presentations this evening. Delegations, there's one, Marilyn Corey, regarding the new pedestrian crossover on Clarence Street. Ms. Corey, do you want to come forward to the podium? And on the podium there's a button, if you could push right in the middle to your left. Push the red button, thank you.
Mr. Mayor and councillors, hi, I'm Marilyn Corey. I'm partially responsible for the installation of the pedestrian crosswalk uptown at Clarence and Catherine. For those of you who weren't here when I initially came forward on this subject, I presented council with over 1,500 names, signatures, backing my proposal. There was a very specific reason for wanting it on the west side of Catherine. It was to make it safe for the elderly and slower moving individuals to cross that very busy intersection. Most of these people either walk uptown or get the bus, and the bus stop is over at City Hall. When they get off the bus, they walk up the sidewalk on the west side of Catherine, past Beaujeu's, therefore wanting to cross right at the Market Cafe over to Shoppers. This was agreed to and passed by council, but in the interim, the city engineer decided that it would be better on the east side of the intersection and proceeded to do it as he saw fit. He had no business doing this without council's approval. Even the CAO didn't know about it until I approached him about it. Anyway, it was done. I had to accept that it was a done deal. But now everyone is complaining about it, and I'm not proud to have my name associated with it. And I was given to understand that we were going to get a pedestrian-activated light, traffic light, like the one on Main Street at Wellington. Obviously, I misunderstood something along the line. Anyway, complaints have been many, as seen in the newspapers, and everyone uptown is talking about it, and not in a positive way. There have been many near misses. Traffic is not stopping. They say the lights are not visible enough. There was no warning about it ahead of time. I was told it would be advertised, per se, in with the people's water bills. That didn't happen. Okay, it was put on social media, or whatever you call it. This is a senior city. How many of us don't have computers? This should have been handled in a better way. I myself have witnessed a lot of vehicles just sailing on through. The other day I saw a car coming from the east side approaching that intersection. The lights were flashing. There was a pedestrian waiting, and that car straddled the crosswalk because he wanted to make a left turn into Catherine, quite oblivious to the lights or the pedestrian. I have a recommendation that the existing structure, to amend the existing structure to a pedestrian-operated traffic light, like they have up on Main Street in Wellington. We need a red light before we will get any reaction.
Okay,
Okay? That's
thank
it.
you. Any questions to our delegation? Okay, I'm going to ask staff, but yeah, there's no questions to the delegation right now? Okay, thank you, Ms. Corey. Mr. Lee, if you could just give us an overview on, especially as we are the new council, this was done by the old council, on why it's there, the type of crosswalk that it is, and there's some other information I know that both council and myself have sent you in the meantime.
Certainly, Mr. Mayor. A bit of a history lesson. With the previous council, this discussion went on for a number of weeks within the council. There was reports presented previously, and in that process, the council of the day made the decision to go with the current design that we see in place. Reason being, essentially, was it's a $30,000 install versus approximately $150,000 install for the signalized section like it's on Main Street with a traffic signal and a light and a traffic light. So council of the day decided to move in that direction. In discussions with the various councillors over a period of time and in looking at the intersection proper, the decision was made by the engineering department after discussions with all of the councillors on an individual basis as to why the move was made to the east side. The reason being is that that's where the road was the narrowest, that's where the crossing time would be the least, and that was the safest location within the intersection without doing a major intersection modification. So the decision then was to continue with that east side installation versus the west side. What's happened since then is the system has been installed. It was installed late in 2018. There was notifications given out, as was said, on social media and on the city's website. And that being said, there was recently an email that was distributed to all the councillors, which was a history lesson for all of you because you haven't been involved in the process. Frank was obviously, and Angie. But that being said, with that email, there's actually a link to that. There's a link to 2 videos that engineering staff had obtained. And what we would recommend that council would endorse is that engineering staff would like to bring the Region of Niagara staff in, who are the individuals who design these intersections and this type of a crossing and are installing them regional-wide. We'd like to bring them in at the January 28th meeting, if that's in agreement with council, and they would like to do a presentation on crossovers, why crossovers are the way they are, the intent of crossovers, and the safety factors involved, and who is responsible and what their responsibilities are within that type of a crossing. It's a new design, it's a new system that came effective in 2016 under the Highway Traffic Act, and this installation was the 3rd one installed within Niagara. There are others that have come on board since. The City of Hamilton has about 25 of them currently. So it's something that's happening province-wide. There's a standard that's set up provincially, and in that discussion and presentation by the regional staff, we'd like to bring those things forward and explain how the legislation works, how the crossovers are supposed to work, and then we can answer any other questions that the public or council may have.
Okay. I'm sure consensus around this table will be to bring those, the regional staff down. Is that okay? Consensus? Okay, Chris, so let's move ahead with that. And then obviously coming out of that, we can add an education component to our website, notifications to our ratepayers, and water bills were talked about. We've done that in the past when I served here as a councillor. So those things can come forward, correct?
Yeah, yes, Mr. Mayor. Well, what we've actually done is we've reached out, we've talked with the communications people for the city. They've viewed the videos. We're trying to make it a Port Colborne specific video that'll be on our website. There's been discussions preliminary already with the region and the City of Hamilton to get rights to those videos so that we can use those with our name. So we're working through the logistics on that, and it'll be an education process that we'll push forward into 2019.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Any questions? Angie?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I'd just like to say that in advance of the crosswalk going in, I had attended a Regional Active Transportation Committee meeting where upright educational displays were made available, and brought one back to Port Colborne. It's been in the library for quite some time, showing people how crossovers work, how to properly use them. It's now, I believe, come back to City Hall, or will be back to City Hall very soon, to be used in the lobby here. So we have had some training out there, not nearly as much as obviously what's needed, because we need to have something that will also educate the drivers. There is a problem there.
Correct. I think it's been on both sides. I know I've talked to the fire chief with regards to this, where we've had people actually walk right into a car as opposed to waiting and make sure people stop. So there is an education component to both sides here. So that's something I know staff will bring forward through us that we can go back to our community about. Gary, Councillor Bruno.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Not that I'm advocating this at this time, but through you to Chris. Chris, any of the components of that install, the underground wiring, the controller, all of that, is that any of that conducive to doing a light at some point in the future? In other words, what I'm looking for is if we did that was all not for naught, the $30,000.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruno. Some of that hardware, as you would indicated, is reusable, but things like the controllers and the buttons and all those become obsolete because of the tie-in with the computer system that would control the lights. So some of the hardware, if the decision was to go to that other system, would be reusable, but some of it would have to be recycled or reused somewhere else.
Thank you, Councillor Bruno. Anybody else? Chris, I know between you and I, with some emails back and forth and some photographs of other communities, although the picture I sent you from Paris, Ontario, was they have 2 in their downtown core, which is very similar to our Clarence Street. They're the old style light with the cap on them. But can we replicate the flashing lights that are on the sides of either side of the crosswalk, to put an addition of a light either way that flashes. Because as we all know, when we drive, our eyes do tend to look forward and up because of street lights, stop lights. Is there a way that we can actually add that to this intersection?
To you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, after you and I had that discussion, we talked with regional staff who do the installs, and that's one of the reasons why they wanted to come and do a presentation to council and to the public, is that the region is trying to implement a regional-wide standard that meets the provincial standards, not to change it too much, so that it's consistent within every municipality within the Niagara region. The issue of the overhead lights that you had mentioned are meant for a higher standard of crossing, which is multiple lanes with islands and things of that nature. So they would like to speak to the nitty-gritty of that.
Okay.
And explain why or why not, and some of the ramifications of not being consistent. So, and they would be more than willing to answer the questions and show the technical reasons as to why things are done that way. But we can definitely entertain anything.
Okay. Well, I'll wait to hear from them when they're coming. Anybody else? Okay, seeing none. Thank you again, Mrs. Corey. Please keep an eye out for our meeting coming up in, sorry, what was the date again, Chris? The date the region's coming down?
January the 28th.
January the 28th meeting. The region will come and give us a presentation on that. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Nothing else under delegations. Now is the mayor's report. This Friday is a professional development day, and the city has lots of ways to keep the kids busy. Register for our full-day active camps. There's a Golden Puck free skate at the Valet Center from 1 to 2:20 p.m. You can get crafty at the Port Colborne Public Library. Paint your own dice box from 3 to 4 p.m. Ages 8 and up, and there's a $5 pre-registration required. City of Port Colborne Sports Fest is coming up on February 8th to 10th. For a full list of events and learn how you can participate, please visit portcolborne.ca/page/sportsfest. So if you go to our website, you can find the information there. Nominations are now open for the 2019 T. Roy Adams Humanitarian of the Year Award. In memory of the late Councillor T. Roy Adams, Niagara Region initiated a memorial award in 2003 in his name to honor a resident of Niagara who best exemplifies Roy's values and dedication to community service, a person who sees volunteerism as an integral part of their life. The deadline for receiving nominations is March the 31st of 2019, and for more information and to download a copy of the application, visit www.niagararegion.ca. The City of Port Colborne is currently in the process of developing a Parks and Recreation Master Plan to guide the city's direction for parks, fields, trails, recreational facilities, events, recreation and leisure programming for the next 10 years. We want you to tell us how you participate. There's a community workshop Thursday, January the 24th from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. The consulting team from MHBC will make a brief presentation at 6:30, followed by a facilitated discussion on the strengths, challenges, and opportunities for the city to consider in the preparation of the master plan. It will happen right here on the 3rd floor in the council chambers. So again, that's Thursday, January 24th from 6:30 to 8:30 with regards to our Parks and Recreation Master Plan. Over the last week, I've been having meetings with different businesses and people within the City of Port Colborne. But this past week, we met with Ontario Tourism Minister Michael Tobolo. What Mr. Tobolo or Minister Tobolo came out with the Niagara mayors that we met with is a Made in Niagara tourism plan with all 12 municipalities participating. There's myself and 2 other mayors that will take this back to the region to develop a Made in Niagara plan. I've spoken to Brock University through their tourism education department. They want to be involved, and we'll be contacting Niagara College with this. Minister Tobolo indicated to us that Ontario right now has 4% gross domestic product that is derived from tourism. This government wants to increase that to 8%. As everybody's read in the paper, it's not like there's more dollars available. As his words were, we are broke. But there is a look to how they can reestablish the money that's available and how they may be able to move it around the province to areas that will grow the GDP of tourism. So that is high on this government's list and high on Minister Tobola's list. So we will be utilizing this very quickly. He wants something in his hands by the springtime. So we'll be moving forward with that between our municipality, economic development and tourism departments, the region, and both education facilities here in Niagara. So that's it for my report. Any questions? No? Okay. We have our regional councillor report. Councillor Butters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Glad to be here tonight. Last week was a whirlwind. I think I was at the region 4 days out of 5. Lots of learning happening there with workshops, and we started the budget as well to the tune of $274 million and 168 projects, which just kind of blows my mind, just the sheer numbers of magnitude of that. So that's what we're into right now. I wanted also to let you know that I volunteered to go on 3 of the standing committees, corporate services, public health and social services, and planning and economic development, as well as transportation steering committee, waste management, agricultural policy and action, and a regional development charge policy task force. And that one really won't start for about another year to 18 months. And the T. Roy Adams Humanitarian Award. And I got elected to go on to the Niagara Regional Housing Board, which I'm really, really happy about. So as we go forward, I know that I'm going to be able to bring back more things to share with you. But right now, it is one heck of a learning curve, which I'm enjoying totally. So with that, that's it, unless you have questions.
Thank you, Councillor. Any questions to the regional councillor? Seeing none. Thanks, Barb. Appreciate it. We work very well down there together. So bigger and better things coming for Port Colborne and the region. So I will be meeting with Ron Tripp with regards to projects happening here, so as you already know. Thank you. Next is Councillors Items. No? Councillors Items? That's you.
I'd like to bring forward a notice of motion regarding the rezoning of lands in the east side of Port Colborne.
Thank you. Okay, so that'll come forward the next meeting. Correct, Councillor? Yes. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Anything else? Okay. Okay, now we're on to consideration of items that were brought forward earlier. Item number 1, Councillor Demery.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Planning and Development Department, Planning Division, report number 2019-01, subject, private retail of cannabis.
Okay, thank you. Seconder? Councillor Clayla? Questions? Oh, you want her to go? You want her to go? Okay, thank you. Right now we have a delegation with regards to this item. Mr. Norbert Giger. Norbert wants to come forward. I've got a copy of it. Okay. Thanks, Norbert, and welcome.
Okay, I would just like to address this from a slightly different aspect that has been addressed to this point. Does everybody have a copy of what I'm going to be talking about? Because it was printed off. Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm addressing it from the healthcare aspect. It appears that this has been addressed mainly from a financial aspect, revenue stream aspect, and that's a very real component. I mean, cannabis has been legalized. It's a fact. It cannot be changed and will not be changed. I'm not here to discuss that. I'm here basically to discuss all of the things that should be considered when making your decision as a council. I mean, it's been broken down into two categories already, recreational and medicinal. What we're talking about here is the recreational aspect. Before you make a vote, I'd just like to consider certain things. My background comes from dealing with issues and discussions. It has to do with reports, inquiries that come under the umbrella of the Healthcare Act. And I've been involved with that, protecting the public of Ontario, probably for about 7 years, in major cases and minor cases. And I would just like you to consider everything when you make this decision. So some of the key questions that I would ask myself, if something like this was brought forward to me in one of the cases, you always separate things out into opting in, what does that really mean? Opting out, what does that really mean? What are the consequences of both of those decisions? What is the burden of each one of those? I'm used to having a risk assessment, and then from the risk assessment, you do an impact statement from the various components of whatever you're being asked to address. Based on that, you start dividing it up, and you see what kind of impact it will have on the public when you are protecting them. And that's where I'm coming from in this area. So some of the key questions I think that should be asked or should have been asked, I don't know if they were. For example, it's like, have you asked for a risk assessment and impact statement from Niagara Regional Police? I mean, I read one of the reports. They are looking at the age as of January of this year. If you are eligible, if you're of an eligible age to purchase cannabis, the requirements, according to police in driving, the implications are pretty severe. I can forward that to you. I hope you've read it. But if the age, for example, were 21, the impact on those people is totally different. If you're top, first time, second, third, so keep things like that in mind when you make your decision. When this was all brought up, I read the federal report, and in there it says that the province does have the right to establish the age that this will be established at. Why they picked the age of 19 is beyond me, when everything within the federal government, the Ministry of Health especially, all the government statements say that the age of 24 to 25 is a more reasonable age to look at because of the impact of a developing brain. So, do we want as a council to take that responsibility of what your decision will have on your constituents based on that alone? Okay, because it does have an impact on brain development. And if you consent to the age of 19, even if you verbally say to them, we do not agree with that age as a basis, you are at least taking a position saying that you have done your research, you've done your homework, and your best interests are in the constituents of Port Colborne, especially the youth. Okay, now this is turned on me. Have you asked, for example, a risk assessment, an impact statement from Niagara Regional School Boards? Because the schools will be impacted. Also included that should be the teachers' associations. Did you ask for a risk assessment and impact statement from Niagara Healthcare System? They will be impacted in ways that you can only imagine. Have you approached the physicians and surgeons? They have very strong statements in this regard also. There are other healthcare practitioners that I think should be consulted. Again, I've got to say the way it was presented here, it was from a financial aspect only, but it failed to look at the broader scope of what you're actually deciding on. Have you asked for a risk assessment and impact statement from Niagara Regional Social Services? I deal with them, have dealt with them for approximately 40 years. I know what happens. I know how they're strained already. I wish you would ask them, how is that going to impact the Niagara region? Because we contribute to that financially as a city, as a municipality. Have you asked them What kind of impact will that have? How much will that impact the people that live in Port Colborne already? I think it's an important question. We have, for example, Newport facilities over here that have dealt with mental disabilities, mental disorders, drug addiction for many, many, many years. It's sitting right here in Port Colborne. I hope you've at least asked them for their information, how they feel about this. Port Cares would be another one. The discussions that we've had in the summertime regarding policing and the, as we've referred to them, the 10 cities that have sprung up, the number of people with mental, the number of people that live in Port Colborne now or reside here or have taken up residence here that have mental health concerns. Will that number only be increased over here? We've had police over here last summer discussing, I mean, I've had people breaking into my place, the dumpster divers. There are all kinds of problems already, let alone what this may actually contribute to it. There is a government website regarding cannabis and its effect on the mental health. I hope you've read that one. That one specifically addresses the age of 25 and how cannabis will impair brain development. It also talks about the increased risk of suicide, depression, anxiety disorders, as well as psychotic symptoms and other disturbances that will occur. Have you taken that into consideration by having a storefront over here? Has this city responded to the Health Canada's request that came out, if I remember correctly, it was February the 20th of 2018, where they are looking at drafting and minimizing the public risk and public safety risks posed by the new classes of cannabis that are being introduced right now that you have not been asked to vote on. You've been asked to vote on simply having a storefront of cannabis. The new additions to that, the new classes, are the edible cannabis, cannabis extracts, and cannabis topicals. Have you taken all of those into consideration and how that may impact the community? Health Canada has requested municipalities to participate in setting regulations that will help protect the public. I believe that's open until January the 20th. I hope you take the opportunity to look at that and become a participant. Who have they asked to participate in that? They've asked everyone from industry to all of the healthcare arms and municipality. I mean, there's a bunch of organizations they've asked for their input as to how these additional cannabis regulations will impact all of this. So these are all things that we have to take into consideration. Since a huge impact, as far as I'm concerned, will be shouldered by the healthcare system alone, I'd now like to take the time to point out several responsibilities as councillors when making a decision of this nature. And I'm not going to address the Provincial Health Care Act, because that act is, it governs everyone and everything under that umbrella. We, with our decisions, will impact everything under that umbrella, but we are not responsible to it, or it is not responsible to us. So what I'm going to cite is Section 7 of the Charter of Rights as it pertains to health care. Now, what I'm going to cite is Chihuahua case, and this is an actual case. It started in the province of Quebec, went to the Supreme Court, was appealed, then it went to the Supreme Court of Canada, and I'm merely going to recite the findings of that particular
Two minutes, Norbert, please.
Pardon?
You have 2 minutes. There's a 10-minute max in these.
I'll try
Thanks.
my best.
Thank you.
You're asking me to condense something that takes hours to do And these are serious considerations.
Norbert, I understand that, but we do have a policy in the city that is
Okay.
at 10 minutes, so you're well aware of that. Please, you've got 2
I will
minutes. to
try
finish
my
it.
best. Now, you've
Thank
just
you.
used up 2 minutes of it.
Thank you.
Okay? So anyway, underneath that charter, I'm going to jump right to it then. The charter, according to the case, these are the findings, okay? You have the right to 3 key things. One is life, liberty, and security of person. I'm going to jump right down to the third one then in this case, which is security of person. Finally, they have the right not to be harmed physically, mentally, or psychologically. This is according to the Supreme Court of Canada as it pertains to health care under Section 7. While Canadians are entitled to life, liberty, and security under Section 7, that does not grant these rights absolutely. There are certain restrictions, but they are defined under a just manner. I'm jumping really quick now. The conclusion of this, according to the majority of justices, is that constitutionally they recognize that healthcare decisions that will have a significant adverse effect on human dignity, anatomy, physical, psychologically, the integrity, and other basic constitutional norms. So this decision this is where you fall under this, okay? Because this impacts your decision as to how you are going to affect your constituents. So therefore, I ask you, are you causing physical, mental, psychological harm to the very constituents you are asked to serve and protect? Let us therefore be fully informed of the consequence of a simple vote, yes or no, in or out. From the way this has been downloaded to the municipalities, you are being forced to shoulder the consequences of all of the incidentals that they are not telling you, that they don't really know will happen. The burden, they are dropping all of that on your shoulders. So in conclusion, this burden rests with you, and the burden of this responsibility must be shouldered by the Ontario government as recommended by the federal government, okay? That they are downloading that responsibility of you, of the fallout, to me is just, I just cannot condone that. And I'd like you to consider that.
Let me just,
Two more seconds.
No, I'm going to have questions now.
Okay.
I've got to stick to our
Sorry.
policy. That's just, unfortunately, we have to do that. So, any questions to the speaker? To the speaker? Questions to the speaker? Seeing none, thank you, Norbert. I do appreciate it.
No questions. Shocked.
Thank you. Okay, so we do have a motion on the floor. It has been duly seconded. Councillor Demery.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I thought it only fitting that it would be me that lifted this because I was the most vocal on council as far as making sure that we got public input, making sure that we had fully researched and fully educated ourselves on the impacts of what we're about to look at. And I feel that we have done that. We've reached out, and I've heard from many people, and I now know what they're feeling and why they feel it. I've done about as much research on this as I possibly could do in that time period. I've attended many educationals along with Councillor Butters. We've gone to a few things. We've spoken to the police, we've spoken to the Mounties, we've spoken to healthcare people, we've spoken to teachers. We've been out there doing that research. And after having done all of that and recognizing that we are deciding a matter on recreational use only, we're not talking about medical use here, and we're talking about retail sales only. We're not talking about whether a drug should be allowed or not, whether it should be used or not, or even how it is used and where it is used. We're just talking about retail use. I, at this point, feel that I have learned enough and heard from enough people that I can fully support us going forward, and that, for me, is a milestone.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Clayla?
Can I make a motion? Or
No, the motion's on the floor.
I thought that I had brought it up first. Was I not allowed to have the motion as to?
You asked to speak on the item. The motion was brought up, you seconded it. The report is on the floor.
Okay.
Yeah, so the report that you have in your package is on the floor.
That is, okay. So
Yeah.
then, so I'm speaking to that motion? And in order to change that motion, can I do that?
No, you turn it down and then a new motion, if it's
Okay.
defeated, a new motion can come forward.
Okay.
But you can speak in the positive or the negative to that motion.
Okay.
Okay?
All right.
The staff's report coming forward.
My apologies. I
Yeah.
thought that I could change the motion. Okay. I as well have done all kinds of research on this. I've lived it for the last 20, 30 years of my career prior to coming to council, and I totally understand the business side of this. At the same time, I guess I'm looking at the fact that we're talking about community health, and this is not a business decision, it's a community health decision. And I guess I look at the fact, again, that we can get in at any time we want, but once we're in, we cannot get out. So this is like a door has been opened to us. We can look in and see what's going on. We're being given that opportunity. But instead, once we walk through that door, it closes, and we're not allowed to come out. So I guess I look at the fact that we can learn from everybody else. Everything that's happened so far has been so, there has been so much confusion and chaos and just changing overnight on everything that's gone on, but regarding it, that I'm just not sure that to jump in and say, oh yes, we're in, with no option to be out at any other time. Whereas if we opt out at this point, we always have that option of going in. We can go in 6 months from now, we can go in 2 years from now, we can do whatever we want. We can see, we can learn from every other community around, all the involvement, the things that go on, how they're dealing with the situations that arise, because I too feel that we're in for a lot more than we really realize. We've got people complaining constantly about taxes now. I don't think that any amount of tax dollars that come to us through the government, if they come, and if you read the wording carefully, everything is prefaced by the word may or if there is money, if this happens, this may change. We've already seen the changes. We've seen them just since Mr. Aquilina did the report. There were changes that happened all throughout it. It's a daily moving target. So I just don't see why we're rushing into this. We don't have to rush into it. We can take our time. We can learn from other people. We can learn how to avoid their mistakes, how to save taxpayer dollars. In retrospect, I agree that we wouldn't probably move too quickly to even do the survey, because I think that it was probably a total waste of money, because there's been so many questions raised about, you know, how it was done, the fact that people were away, all the different things, the negatives about it. A lot of effort went into it, and you know, it gave us more information, but at the same time, I'm not sure that we have all of the accurate information that we need to make this kind of a decision. This is going to be with us forever. This decision will be with us forever, and I just think that if we really want to represent our taxpayers, and we want to make the right decision, we need to just sit back. All the other small municipalities in the area are doing that same thing. They're trying to learn from other people. Why should we waste our time, effort, and money? And we have a lot of other important issues on the line at the same time. We want to attract good business to our city. And I'm saying, and I'm kind of chuckling, because here we are saying, come on in, we want to have a storefront cannabis, and at the same time our Service Ontario is closing right here in town. And I'm appalled that we're sitting back and letting that happen, because it shouldn't be happening. You know, there's people that need it. And to say that everything can be done online, you can order cannabis online. You can have it delivered to your door. So why do we have to have a storefront? Is there really going to be that much money coming in from that storefront? I think that we're going to need all the money that we can get to deal with the fallout from this move that we're making. But again, it's been legalized, it's going to happen, so we have to make the best of it. And I truly believe that if we sit back and look and learn, that we can save a lot of money and a lot of effort. And I think that at the end of the day, if we want to have retail at some point, we can revisit this and do it at that time.
Thank you,
Sorry.
Councillor. Councillor Bruno?
Thank you, Worship. I've got a number of points to make, but I wanted to first address the fact that Norbert spoke, and spoke so eloquently. Norbert, the reason I didn't ask you a question is because not only do I agree with a lot of what you said, but I basically just had a comment, and that I appreciate your forthrightness about the fact that this is here, and it was a burden that's been put on a municipality, not at the province. However, I want to digress from that point. You know, a lot of people are concerned, and rightfully so, about what will happen. I haven't heard much thought about what is happening. So The reality is that depending on which study you look at, there's sort of 16 to 20% of the people that are smoking recreational marijuana now. I find it difficult as a father and a grandfather that my son or daughter or grandson or granddaughter were at the age where they want to try marijuana, that the only option they've had up to now is a back alley or illegal marijuana, and who knows what's in it, who grew it, what it's laced with. So I have a public health concern, but I have a public health concern that's 20 years old. And I think one of the reasons the federal government regulated this wasn't just it's that, it's the dollars, it's resources based on something that they have been unable to stop. I suspect that in 1916, when Prohibition came into effect, that there were a lot of people asking the questions that we're asking today. And it lasted till 1926. So that's 92 years, 93 years. And you asked the right question about, you know, what's going to happen. This is an evolving issue. We don't have all things settled. You're right. Having said that, 91 years later, last year, there were changes in the Liquor License Act. What I'm saying is, and that's a good thing, all acts, all regulations change over time. There's going to be a broad amount of evidence and experience gained, not just in Ontario, but across Canada for these next 12 months. If you look at the 25 licenses, they're first going to municipalities of 50,000 and more. I suspect if Port Colborne gets a license, it'll be 2 years from now. In 2 years, a lot's going to be learned. And I have faith in whatever level of government is, and because it's been proven with alcohol, they keep tweaking, justice departments keep tweaking, public health keeps tweaking. I mean, think of our alcohol rules in our lifetime. How you bought it today, the age, ride programs, all of this stuff has worked to try and plug those cracks. And I believe that that will happen with cannabis. What I find it difficult debating the right for a retailer to sell a legal controlled substance. To me, it's a bit of an oxymoron. I mean, I think that at some point, moving forward is the right decision. And I predicate it all on the amount of people out there now that are buying marijuana. The only stats I've been able to see is the first 2 weeks of marijuana sales across Canada. If you parlay that out for 52 weeks, it's $1 billion. The market's estimated to be $4.4 billion. That means in 2 weeks, if you can believe those numbers of actual sales, 25%, unless there's a whole raft of new people trying marijuana, 25% of the illegal market money has come away from organized crime and street dealers. That's just a statistical fact. So, and I think, and I understand that the goal is for it to be 40% after the first year. For every dollar that's taken out of that illegal market, there's a dollar going to be in new technologies so you don't drive high and you get caught driving high. And if you look at what the police have said, and if you look at what's coming down the pike, this whole marijuana revolution has caused innovation technologically that those kind of tests are coming. And they're coming because the dollars and the demand are there. So there will be regulation on this stuff. I took it upon myself to ask 2 police officers. I mentioned this on December 10th. One of them undercover in gang, the other detective. So both detective vision. Both indicated to me that you should legalize, you should go opt-in on marijuana because, and I'll quote one of them, we have a lot of issues to deal with. And marijuana is down here on the totem pole of what I'm doing as an undercover officer. So if you get on with it, we'll put that time and energy towards bigger things. As an antidote, he said that once that money starts rolling in, we're being given money. We're going to be given money to do enforcement. Enforcement that isn't there right now. That's the reality, folks. It's not there right now. And I'm sure that in the next 2 years, there'll be a headline of some kid or adult wrapping themselves around a pole, and they will be affected by marijuana. What I never hear is these 20% of the people that are doing that now that you and I don't know about, and there's no means to stop them, it appears. I mean, they've got officers that can detect that, but they don't have technology to do it. So all the things that have happened as a result of the use of marijuana, most of us are unaware of. So why now? To deal with it now. Because right now, it's a smoke screen. People are smoking, they're impaired, they're getting in accidents, and we don't know about it. Doesn't appear in the newspaper who's impaired by narcotics, it's who's impaired by alcohol. So if there's 10% of those folks impaired by narcotics or by marijuana, you know, this is becoming ignorance is bliss. And I hate to say that, but I don't know those numbers. You don't know those numbers. I don't even believe the police know those numbers. But as best I can gather, they think it's about 1 in 20 versus alcohol. I have no idea whether that's true. That's just a statement from an officer. They're in the field. I'm not. What else do I want to say on this? There's been a lot of online surveys from other communities, and I think we can all speculate the validity of those or the non-validity of those. I remember Councillor Bagu in his opening address talked about at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what I want, it ultimately has to matter what the public want. I think to Councillor Demery's point, we've tried to do both. I've listened personally. I've had about 14 interactions. I'm sure everyone on this council has. If I could, I think we should read out, perhaps, or somebody should, what those survey results are. If those of you who don't have them out in front of you, but watching on TV. So on the public consultation results, the online survey, there were 1,411 surveys completed, 71% in favor of opting in, 22% in favor of opting out, 7% in favor of opting out for now. Telephone survey, 400 interviews completed, 56% in favor of opting in, 25% in favor of opting out, 19% in favor of opting out for now. At the open house, there were 45 members of the public attended, 38% in favor of opting in, that was 9 responses, 54% in favor of opting out, that was 13 responses, and 8% in favor of opting out for now, 2 responses. I'm not a polling expert. We could turn to our communications director who put that out. We have others here on council who are better equipped to talk about polling than I am, but certainly there's lots of opinion on the polling. Having said all of that, I will be calling for a recorded vote, and I will be voting for opt-in. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Recorded vote will only be taking place in the council portion, not in the committee of the whole portion. That's right. I'll call you then. You've already spoken for now. Councillor Danch.
So I just want to get a couple things across, and had a short conversation there today with Dan. So Dan, I just want to echo Gary saying 50,000 population, right? Last time I checked, coming into port, I think it's 18.5. So we're a couple people away from that. The storefront. Is there currently an application in place for anybody to open up a store or storefront?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Danch, no, I'm not aware of any applications. In fact, there's no licenses that were applied for based on the lottery that the province conducted.
Once again, thank you very much. If we opt in now, the city will receive 13,000, was it? I just wanna know.
Do you have that, Dan? Or? Yes, I was looking for the exact amount. It's 13,107, I believe. Yes. I thought I had that report somewhere.
Must be government and odd amount, eh?
So, through your worship to Councillor
Yes.
Dance, I believe it's two payments. First one, 13,107. If we opt out, second one, 5,000. If we opt in, second one, 13,107 plus the amount of all the municipalities that opt out and get dropped down to 5,000 gets redistributed among all of the opt-in municipalities. So our number would be higher by the number of cities that drop out.
So a financial gain for the taxpayers for sure. We still don't have a storefront. We don't have an application in place. And we get the money. So from that side of the coin, it's a good idea. We currently have in our community, we have an LCBO. We have a beer store. We don't have a casino. I'm Hungarian, I don't gamble, so. But those things are out there. They're all controlled by the AGC. This thing would be controlled by the AGC as well. I don't know. I mean, it's a funny topic for sure, although it's not so funny unless you're high, then it's funny, but it's something to consider. I mean, the money's there for the community. We've got a pretty good gallery here tonight. It's nice to see. If you're going to take it off the streets, it's probably a good thing. There's other things going on in our community that individuals make money from on a legal side of things, not an illegal side. So I question. I mean, I'll be there for the vote for sure. That's just my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Danch. Councillor Wells.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, Mayor, to Mr. Aquilina. One of the concerns is about this buffer zone in regards to the storefronts, and the regulations call for 150 meters separation, and that is just in the regulations from the schools, if I'm not either private or public schools. It does not refer to any other public places like a park, a hospital, a playground, any other areas like that. Is that correct?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Wells, that is correct. The policy that I drafted considers other separation distances as well that are not under the regulation, but they're there under the policy as what was recommended by the Association of Municipalities of Ontario to have a policy. So if an application is made, council will then receive that application request for comment. Council of the day can then review that policy and then make a decision based on the criteria that's under the policy.
Through you, Mayor, back to Dan. With that policy in place, how enforceable is it, and who will do the enforcing of that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Wells, the policy is a policy that the council would have to consider when making the decision whether or not they have any comments to the AGCO. The municipality is not the enforcement officer for the legislation. That rests with the OPP, or if they've had any communication with the NRP. So the municipality has no enforcement legally.
Councillor?
Thank you. In following from that question, and I'm not sure if Mr. Sensi can answer this one here, is that Norbert had expressed that up to now a lot of the pros and cons have been based upon a financial background. So through you, Mayor, to maybe Mr. Sensi on this regards, has there been any plan or thought been put toward the funds that we would be receiving from the OCLF in regards to where they would be distributed, how they would be used?
Mr. Sinnes?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Wells. At this point, no. We have received, or receiving this week actually, the $13,107 from the province, and that would be set aside in a reserve account until such time that council and staff determine what it should be used on, and there is certain criteria within the legislation as to how the funds are to be used and what they're to be used on, and then that would be determined by staff and council as to what the process is going to be going forward. But at this point in time, there's no policy in place or restrictions on how we're going to spend it, but it'll be something that we would be approving on an ongoing basis going forward.
Okay. Thank you. One last question, and I believe this would go through Mayor to Dan again. It's in regards to the concept of having a cannabis legalization action plan, and the question would be to Dan, and maybe not Dan specifically, but is there any action being worked on through city staff in regards to formalizing the cannabis legalization plan?
Mr. Aquilina?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Wells, no, there's been no discussion on staff at the staff level to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wells. Councillor Borgard?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just would like to clear up some of the facts, well, state the facts. So cannabis is legal whether we like it or not. No matter council's decision today, cannabis will be sold to the residents of Port Colborne through the province's online system, which the city gains no money from. By opting in today, we will receive monies from the province that will not be available to us if we opt out, even if council decides to opt in at a later date. The legislation was created with the intention of combating the black market, which does exist in Port Colborne. Right? So these are some of the facts that exist. Since cannabis is going to be sold to residents of Port Colborne online, no matter our decision today, it is in the best interest of Port Colborne and its taxpayers to benefit from it. Only by opting in today can we benefit the most from the sale of cannabis. I would like to read out some of the comments that were actually in the survey. There were two that really grabbed my interest, and I would like to make them clear. So, in particular, there's comment number 143, if you're able to follow along. It's on page 21 of our agenda, but it's page 8 of 43 of the survey. Cannabis has been in the city for decades. Whether the city opts in or opts out, but if there is a problem from it, it is still going to come to the city regardless. So the city can opt out and have no money to deal with any problems that may occur, or opt in and take the money while it's there, because the weed will still come to the city regardless of what the city decides. Cannabis is big business, and if the city doesn't want to opt in, other cities will be more than happy to take Port Colborne citizens' money. Like, honestly, what has changed since October 17th? Nothing. The exact same thing if we opt in, there will be no change except for extra revenue.
Exactly.
The reality is a no-brainer. And then there's another comment, 125, number 125 on page 29, 16 of 43. Concerns related to cannabis, such as odor, cultural impact, etc., have no bearing on this. Cannabis is legal. People in Port Colborne can order online, grow their own, and purchase from neighboring communities who will have retail. However, Amazon and Netflix are terrific examples of how convenience is important to most consumers. A retail store locally may mean the drug dealer on the street has to go get a real job. People can complain about the cost of legalized cannabis as a reason why they will continue to buy from their dealer, but most people will choose a safe and regulated product that they can purchase with their debit card. Anyone who thinks otherwise needs to look at how many people still buy moonshine instead of going to the LCBO. To oppose a local legal option and the benefits it provides is short-sighted and not in the best interest of our community. So these are not my comments, these are comments from people who have taken the survey and are residents of Port Colborne. Today, we have the opportunity to be leaders in the province. When I look to my left and I look to my right, excluding Councillor Botter, who's not here with us today, but actually including him, I see a council that can handle any hurdles that the province bring forwards to us. And that is why I'm in favor of opting in. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. You're good? Okay.
Can I just?
Yes. CAO?
Through your worship, I just want to go back on Councillor Wells' comment or question to Dan Aquilina about a cannabis action plan. I'm a little bit worried that one or the other of us misunderstood the question because, and I don't know if you want to restate it or if you want me just to say what I'm going to say. Do you mean an action plan of how staff are going to handle legal cannabis in the city? Is that what you were getting at, or did you mean some kind of a policy? Just because, well, maybe it's a good time to say we've taken some steps as management in the city for the last 3 or 4 months before legalization. Our senior staff group, and that's the 24 or 25 managers that supervise employees, sat down on numerous occasions, more than one occasion, and we sort of went through every department in the city, every property we own, and we tried to presuppose what the impacts of cannabis use would be. I won't go through the list here because it was done over hours and hours and hours. But say, for example, what if one person's using it on a boat in our marina and the person in the next boat over is complaining to staff about it? How will we handle this situation? What if our city building official enters a home to do a building inspection where the person is growing cannabis and is afraid of some of the impacts of growing cannabis, like, for example, mold? So we went through the entire organization chart and we decided what the possible implications were and how we could put a practice or a policy or a procedure in place to mitigate that. And that exercise was done. In addition to that, I've been meeting with the area CAOs and regional public health to talk about what's the next step. I understand tonight we're talking about storefronts, but we're talking in the future, we'll be talking about consumption in public areas, consumption during canal days, consumption at the entrances to our buildings. And regional public health, on our advice as city CAOs, has proposed amendments to the city's the region's smoking bylaw that will include cannabis for now, while we can study it and see if it should be treated the exact same as, say, for example, alcohol in terms of where you can consume it, or the exact same as smoking in terms of where you can consume it. So, for example, entrances and exits to buildings, the Valley Health and Wellness Center, where you're not supposed to be smoking already, can we regulate that and make sure people aren't smoking cigarettes and cannabis products? Because we want to protect the health and safety of the people who are entering those buildings. So, in terms of an action plan, I think we have worked pretty hard on an action plan for the different impacts on the city by law enforcement, building, and even recreation for residents of the community. So doesn't really have a bearing on whether or not we opt in on storefronts, but we do have an action plan for the legalization. I was going to say the eventual, but it's already here, legalization of recreational cannabis use.
Thank you, CAO. Harry, do you have a comment or question to the CAO?
Yes, I have a response for CAO. You are correct in part, and also on the other side of it. In respect to being a armchair quarterback on this, and hindsight being perfect, we all have comments like our surveys were faulty, like the provincial government's not doing the right thing, and the federal government's not doing the right thing, that this whole issue has been rushed into. So in order to get ahead of that, we need a strategic plan to accommodate those things that we know today, and to be able to accommodate those things that we will learn as we go forward with this. So from my perspective, if we have a plan where we opt in but utilize the resources that are being provided to us, both financially as well as support through this process, in order to achieve a much better community that benefits from the financial side of it, benefits from all the input to it. If we have a plan to work from, we can always add to the plan. But if we don't have any plan to guide us through this, then we will be bouncing off the walls. We'll probably be doing things double and twice. It just doesn't seem to be a strategic way of going through it. So, yes, absolutely with what you said, Scott. I think we need a plan to move forward with this. I think that we need to formalize the plan so that the whole community knows what the plan is, and so that they can comment on the plan and provide input on the plan so that we can address the issues as we come across them. Because the community is going to be the first one to see them.
Thank you, Councillor. And I think, Councillor, aside from what we're going to vote on tonight, because really it's two separate issues, whether we opt in or opt out, I think that plan needs to come forward. So if between now and the next meeting, if you want to sit down with specifically Scott with regards to what staff are doing now and how we as a council can move forward, because we already know what Peter has said, where the money is tied to certain restrictions and how we may use that. But I think all that needs to be tied together. So we can take what we have already, what staff has done, what Peter is doing on the dollar side of things, and then what you think we should be bringing in as a council to further that whole scenario as an action plan for the city. Then yes, so if we can maybe bring that forward to the next meeting. So if you can get together with staff, and then we may do a subcommittee of council to tackle that, to bring something back with public input and everything else. Okay? Thank you, Councillor. Anything new? I know you had your hand up earlier. Anything new?
I just had a question, but you've clarified it somewhat. I was under the understanding that the money could only be used, that the criteria for it were strictly for kind of the negative effects of the marijuana. You know, everything that was talked about were results of difficulties that arise. It wasn't for, it couldn't be used for anything else in the community. Am I misunderstanding that?
Let me go through to Mr. Senez, and he can give us an overview of that, please. Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Senez?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't have the particulars of the criteria with me, but just off the top of my head, I believe it has to be directly related to the cannabis and enforcement, or I believe surveys and things like that. Like that has to be directly related to how you're enforcing and going about the use of the retail stores, how they're going to be, if there's zoning and things installed. Dan may have a little bit more on it, but I believe that that's the type of criteria.
Okay, Mr. Aquilino?
Mayor, it was right in the legislation as to what those monies could be used for. Mm-hmm. And if I recall, it was to deal with policing, by law enforcement, could be building and fire department were actually listed under the regulation. So as Mr. Senez said, can only be spent specifically for those bodies that deal with the legalization, the retail stores,
so can
anything that is to do, and those monies are covered by the monies that the province gives us.
Okay, thank you. But just to clarify, there is a separate dollar amount that goes to the region for policing.
Okay,
so that's not where our money goes. Ours is for internal, and I really believe it can tie in with what Councillor Walls was bringing forward. As that money is going into reserve. Sorry, thank you. Reserve for us. That will come out, and I think through that report that Harry talked about, how with what staff's doing. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, one thing I'm thinking of is what came out of our meeting back in the fall with the police department. Cameras in the downtown cores, whether it be the Humberston core or the Clarence Street corridor, that can tie into it, because that has to do with on the policing side, even though it's our own internal. But can we pay for cameras for something like that? So those things I think will be brought out in that. So I think if we wait for that, we can go from there. Okay. So seeing no further questions, no further comments, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor, please raise your hand. All those opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Thank you, councillors, and thank you to the public. Item number 2. I know I have Councillor Demery is going to bring this forward. However, if I can have the clerk read through this to fill this in, I'll ask you to move it. I'll ask for a seconder, and then we can go on from there. Thank you, Councillor Demery. Madam Clerk.
So there's a number of empty councillor positions, and some councillors have indicated to me their interest. So I'm going to read each committee and the councillor's name. And if you would like to be added or taken off from the list, please let me know. And then at the end, someone can move the full motion, just as we did in December. So for the Canal Days Committee, Councillors Beauregard, Councillor Calealiff, and Councillor Bodner will be appointed. Okay. For the Committee of Adjustment, as there's only one citizen member being appointed tonight, there is 4 councillors that can be appointed. So it'll be Councillor Desmarais, Councillor Beauregard, Councillor Calealiff, and Councillor Bruno have showed interest. Okay. The Environmental Advisory Committee, Councillor Bagu and Councillor Wells. There is one more space if anyone would like to sit on it.
Anybody want to step forward? At this time, we can still run with 2, but if we can get 3, we can always add. All right, think about that. Thank you, Madam Clerk.
The Fair Trade Town Committee. Currently, there is 1 councillor needed, and no one has stepped forward thus far.
Fair Trade, can we have somebody step forward for that, please?
Okay.
All right, we'll move forward.
The Grant Policy Committee, Councillor Bruno and Councillor Beauregard. The Niagara Community Foundation, that has 1 councillor needed. Is anyone willing to step forward?
Councillor Bagu?
Thank
Okay,
you. Notice of Muzzle Appeal Committee, Councillor Desmarais, Councillor Beauregard, Councillor Danch, and Councillor Bagu have stepped forward. Port Colborne Transit Advisory Committee, Councillor Beauregard, and there is space for 1 more if there is someone interested.
Councillor Bruno? Anyone else? Councillor Bruno it is.
And for the Port Colborne Emergency Management, Councillor Desmarais has stepped forward for primary backup, and Councillor Bagu has stepped forward for secondary backup.
Okay. Aside from the 1 committee not having anybody at this time, can I have Councillor Desmarais move this? Seconder, Councillor Beauregard. Any questions? All those in favor? Anybody opposed? That's carried. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Item 3 is done. Item 4, Councillor Bagu.
Community and Economic Development Health Sciences Division Report 2019-02, subject collaboration with the town of Fort Erie for memory clinic services.
Thank you, Councillor. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Danch. Thank you. Questions or comments? Yes, Councillor Bagu.
Just a question, Mayor, is I noticed this is happening at a Mapleview Medical Clinic at a private enterprise. I'm just wondering, is there any reason why it's being done there and not at our Port Colborne Hospital? That's the only question I have.
Okay, staff?
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. At this point in time, my understanding, the service has in the past has been provided at Mapleview Medical Clinic, and so the intention was to return the service to that location, as there are patients that are used to attending that location for the services provided.
Okay. Any other questions? None? All those in favor? That'll be carried. Item number 5, Councillor Desmarais.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. International Women's Day, March 6th, 2019, at the Guildhall, 72 Charlotte Street, Port Colborne.
Can I have a seconder for that? Councillor Beauregard. Councillor Desmarais.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to say that this is an event that I've attended many years now, and it is truly a municipally significant event that underlines women's issues and has usually some very interesting speakers come. This year in particular, we have an OPP officer coming to talk about her struggles through the system and some of her successes. And it's a very enlightening evening. It empowers many women who find themselves in a rough place, but it's also wonderful for men to come and support this and to hear this and be aware. So please, tickets are something in the neighborhood of $30. come on out. It's a great meal, and you'll learn a lot. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I did receive my invitation today. I did check my schedule. At this point, I am available that evening, so I will be attending. So I'll look forward to being with yourself and actually Councillor Butters, who whispered in my ear a couple days ago with regards to it, so she'll be there also. So I do, to let all the other councillors know that if you're available, please attend. Okay, so all those in favor of item 5? Those opposed? That's carried. Oh, we already had your notice of motion, Councillor, so that's fine. Councillor Borgard, any other notices of motion? Yes, Councillor Desmarais.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, just wanted to present this notice of motion to let everyone know that at the next council meeting on January 28th, I'll be bringing forward a notice of motion a motion to direct staff to engage with stakeholders to create a coordinated municipal affordable housing strategy or plan for the City of Port Colborne, with the goal to create affordable options across the housing continuum.
Thank you, Councillor. Motion to adjourn. Councillor Danch, Councillor Beauregard, all those in favor? That's carried. Okay, so now we'll move into our regular meeting of council. I'll call this meeting to order. Introduction of addendum items. Madam Clerk.
There are no addendum items except the ones that were already listed in the committee.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Any confirmation of agenda? Mover or seconder? Councillor Wells, Councillor Desmarais. Any questions? All those in favor? That's carried. Any disclosures of interest? We'll do the adoption of minutes in block. We have the inaugural meeting of Council 29-18 held on December 3rd, 2018. The regular meeting of Council 30-18 held on December 10th, 2018. And the special meeting of Council 31-18 held on December 12th, 2018. Can I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Beauregard, Councillor Clayliff. Any questions to those minutes? All in favor? That's carried. Items determining separate discussion. Councillor Bruno.
Yes, recorded vote for item 1, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other items to be removed? Okay, approval of all the other items. Mover and a seconder. Councillor Bruno, Councillor Wells. Any questions? All those in favor? That's carried. Okay, consideration of items requiring a separate discussion. So I have a mover for item 1, Planning and Development Department Planning Division Report number 2019-01, subject private retail of cannabis. I have Councillor Bruno. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Danch. And I'll turn this over to Madam Clerk.
So I will now be calling a recorded vote on item 1. I will be calling your name alphabetically. When I state your name, please say yes or no in favor or opposition of the recommendation, which is to opt into the cannabis retail. So Councillor Bagu.
Yes.
Councillor Beauregard.
Yes.
Councillor Bruno.
Yes.
Councillor Danch.
Yes.
Councillor Desmarais.
Yes.
Councillor Kilala.
Opposed?
Councillor Wells.
No?
And Mayor Steele.
Yes.
So that is 6 in favor and 2 against, so the motion passes.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. There's no proclamations this evening. We have 1 board and commission and committee minutes. Minutes of the Port Colborne Public Library Board meeting of November 13th, 2018. Can I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Bagu, Councillor Wells. Any questions to that report? All in favor? That's carried. Consideration of bylaws. Madam Clerk.
It's one bylaw this evening, 6637-01-19, being a bylaw to adopt, ratify, and confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Corporation of the City of Port Colborne at its regular meeting of January 14th, 2019.
Can I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Beauregard, Councillor Desmarais, any questions? All in favor? That's carried. Council will be now moving into closed session. We will be using this chamber, so I'll have to ask public and staff that aren't related to this item to leave. You can come back in because we will only be maximum of 5 minutes. It has to do with boards, committees for the organization. So I don't think anybody in the front here. Oh, sorry. Yes. No, I know. But you're staying. You guys don't need to stay. You can leave. Okay. I need a mover and a second to move into closed session. Councillor Wells, Councillor Bruno. Any questions, comments? All in favor? That's carried. Okay. I'm going to close the back doors. Just give me the thumbs up. Okay, so we're all set? So we're moving back into open session from closed session. We have a motion that is being brought out into open session. And I'll read the motion, ask for a seconder, or a mover and a seconder, that Betty Conk, Norbert Giger, Frank Beres, Michelle Benes Tanner, Sean Tiley, Jesse Bowles, Rob Phillips, and Mariana Pilligan be appointed to the Downtown Business Improvement Area Board for a term ending December 31st, 2022. Can I have a mover? Councillor Wells, Councillor Bagu. Any questions with regards to that? All in favor? That's carried. You all set? And now we're looking for a motion to adjourn. Councillor Danch, Councillor Beauregard, any questions? All in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. Just before you go, there are 2 budget meetings coming up, January 21st and January 23rd, both starting here in the council chambers at 5:30 p.m. Thank you and have a good week.